My half-brother. My wife. An affair that had been unfolding in the shadows for months. And I had no idea. But when the truth finally surfaced, it shattered everything I believed about love, loyalty, and family. I'm 30 years old, and my half-brother, let's call him Jerry, is 35. He was born from my dad's first marriage, though that relationship fell apart when Jerry was just a baby. My mom always told me the divorce happened because they were incompatible, but my dad never abandoned Jerry. He shared custody, remained active in his life. 2 years after the split, he met my mother. It was the kind of love story people dream about, at least, that's how she tells it. She was sitting in a coffee shop, sipping on her drink, when my dad walked by and saw her through the window. Something about her made him stop in his tracks. Without hesitation, he stepped inside, struck up a conversation, and asked her out right then and there. A whirlwind romance followed. A few months later, he got down on one knee. She said yes without a second thought, because, in her heart, she believed they were soulmates. For a while, it seemed like the perfect love story. Until my dad did the unthinkable. A year into their marriage, he cheated. Not just a one-time mistake, but a full-blown affair with a coworker. Overcome with guilt, he confessed everything to my mom. Most women would have walked away. But she didn't. She forgave him. They went to marriage counseling, tried to rebuild what had been broken. And my mother, convinced that a baby would heal their wounds, decided to have me. She calls it romantic. I call it dysfunctional. See, my parents had perfected the art of appearances. They wore their marriage like a mask, playing the role of the perfect couple whenever guests came over. People would gush about how in love they still were, how they had cracked the code to a happy marriage. But behind closed doors, it was different. There was no endless affection, no spontaneous kisses. Just two people determined to sell the illusion of a flawless love. And that pressure extended to me. My childhood was a relentless schedule of lessons, sports, and extracurriculars. I had to be exceptional, no excuses. Free time? A luxury I wasn't allowed. It wasn't until high school that I finally pushed back and demanded space to just breathe. But the expectations didn't stop. My father believed success wasn't optional, it was the only path. Jerry and I were expected to excel, and we did. Straight A's, top-tier universities. Jerry went to one of the best medical schools in the country. I landed in an Ivy League business program. The pressure molded us into high achievers, but it came at a cost. And then there was the matter of marriage. When Jerry hit 30, my dad sat him down. The message was clear, it was time to find a wife and settle down before it was too late. Jerry had been in a messy, on-again off-again relationship with a woman named Tina for 5 years. My dad had known about her, but after that talk, Jerry suddenly got serious. Within a year, he proposed. 3 years ago, they got married. Last year, they had a baby. Jerry and I were never particularly close, so I didn't hear all this from him. I heard it from my father. And not just in passing, he made a point to remind me that he was the mastermind behind Jerry's marriage. He even brought up his own past affair, telling me how unfulfilled he had been until he committed to my mom and had a child. He was convinced marriage and fatherhood were the answers to everything. And now, it was my turn. The irony? I had already made my decision. I had been planning to propose to my girlfriend, Carla. We'd been together for 3 years, living together for 2. It was inevitable. My dad got to believe he had influenced me, but the truth is, his speech had nothing to do with it. 2 months after our conversation, on my birthday, I proposed. She said yes. 3 months later, we were married. I thought we were happy. I thought I had made the right choice. But if that were true, I wouldn't be here telling this story. Our marriage lasted only 2 months before it all fell apart. Just a week ago, I filed for divorce. The reason? Carla had been having an affair. Not just with anyone. With Jerry. And it had been happening since the moment we got engaged. I never suspected a thing. I wouldn't have found out if not for one small, accidental discovery. It started with something simple. I was looking for a missing piece of clothing. Carla wasn't home, so I searched everywhere. Finally, I decided to check her closet. As I rummaged through her clothes, I felt something hard inside the pocket of a pair of jeans. I reached in and pulled out a phone. Not her phone. A second phone. A burner. I should have put it down. I should have walked away. But my gut told me to look. It wasn't locked. There was only one text thread. And the number? It was familiar. It was Jerry's. My stomach dropped. My fingers trembled as I scrolled. The messages stretched back months, 3 weeks after I proposed, to be exact. They weren't just talking. They were flirting, pouring their feelings into every word like two lovesick teenagers. And then, the worst part. They confessed. They were in love. With each message, my world cracked a little more. Months after our engagement, they were making promises, vows of a different kind. Not to their spouses, but to each other. They swore they'd endure the deception, bide their time until my nephew turned 5. 5 years of lies. 5 years of a carefully constructed illusion. Only then would they rip off the mask, file for divorce, and come clean. That was the plan. That was their twisted roadmap to happiness. And I was nothing more than a roadblock in their way. My stomach churned as I read every word. 5 years of deceit? 5 years of waking up next to someone who had already planned their escape? It was sick. Deranged. I refused to be a part of it. Without hesitation, I grabbed a suitcase and started stuffing it with whatever I could. Carla wouldn't be home for hours. She was out with friends. That gave me time. Time to erase myself from the life we built. Screenshots. As many as I could take. Every message, every whisper of betrayal, saved. Proof. Evidence. Then I was gone. No note. No explanation. Just a burner phone left on the bed, silent, damning, undeniable. She'd know exactly what it meant. My hands trembled on the wheel as I drove. I didn't stop until I reached a hotel miles from town. The weight of it all pressed against my chest, a crushing force that wouldn't let up. Jerry and I had never been close, but we were never enemies either. And yet, reading those messages, I realized the truth. The night I had proposed, the night I had thought was ours, was the night he had made his move. That same evening, I had been celebrating with family and friends, basking in the glow of love and commitment. Carla had disappeared for a bit, but I hadn't thought much of it. Maybe she was fixing her makeup. Maybe she needed a moment to breathe. But no, while I was inside, laughing, raising a glass to our future, she had been outside, tangled up with my married brother. Their lips, their hands, betraying me in the darkness of our own backyard. I felt sick. Reading their messages, I could see them reminiscing, revisiting that night like it was their twisted fairy tale. Every reference, every secret note, it was all there. Mocking me. While I had been celebrating us, she had been locked in his arms, lost in a moment that had nothing to do with me. My fiancé. My brother. A disgusting, unforgivable betrayal. I called my lawyer that same evening. Divorce. It had to happen. And I needed to make sure Carla walked away with nothing. No alimony. No settlement. She had planned to bleed me dry. I had seen the proof in her messages. She sneered at my career, dismissed me as some glorified accountant. Never mind that I had built my own business from the ground up with my partners, that we were thriving. She wanted a doctor. A man with prestige. Status. As if she was in any position to judge. The texts were filled with laughter at my expense. She and Jerry, ridiculing me, tearing me apart behind my back. The hatred in my chest burned. Jerry deserved to be exposed. Tina, his wife, needed to know. But I wasn't ready yet. The darkness inside me was suffocating, and I needed time to gather myself. I blocked both of them on every platform. I didn't want their excuses. Their lies. I wanted them gone. 2 days passed. The hotel room felt cold, unfamiliar, but at least it wasn't poisoned with memories of Carla. I expected, maybe, some attempt at an apology. A desperate plea for forgiveness. Instead, on the 3rd day, my phone rang. My father. His voice was calm, measured. He told me he had heard about the affair. Carla had found the burner phone, panicked, and reached out to Jerry. Jerry, unable to reach me, had run to my parents. And now, my father had become their mouthpiece. At first, he sounded sympathetic. He said he was sorry, that he hated seeing me go through this. But then, his tone shifted. He had a request, one I had already anticipated, but hearing it still made my blood run cold. He wanted me to stay silent. I pressed record on my phone, knowing what was coming next. When I asked him why, he gave the excuse I expected: Jerry had a child. Telling Tina would ruin his life. She came from a powerful family, well-connected, influential. If she found out, she would make sure Jerry lost everything: his marriage, his son, his reputation. My father pleaded, saying he had already spoken to Jerry, had made him promise to stop. As if that changed anything. As if that erased what had already been done. And through it all, they expected me to be complicit. To protect the man who had betrayed me. To shield the woman who had shattered my trust. I listened, silent, my fingers gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. They wanted me to pretend none of this had happened. They wanted me to lie. They had no idea what was coming. Seeing Carla again was an option, if I wanted to. If I really wanted to, I could sweep everything under the rug, patch things up with my wife, and make it work. That's what my mother had done, after all. She had forgiven my father's infidelity, and their marriage had somehow turned into something beautiful, despite his betrayal. So now, my parents were convinced I should follow in their footsteps. They believed I should forgive Carla. Forgive Jerry. Move past their stupid little mistake. They were both really sorry, they said. A bold move, really, my parents, and even Jerry, trying to convince me that staying silent was the best course of action. That telling Tina the truth would be the real mistake. After everything he had done to me, Jerry still had the audacity to expect my cooperation. I was stunned, speechless at their sheer nerve. The moment I realized what they were asking, I ended the call. I had nothing left to say. My part was already done. I had recorded everything I needed, and I wasn't about to entertain their ridiculous request. Fury burned in my chest. My parents had always been obsessed with appearances, but this was next-level insanity. Did they really believe I would keep my mouth shut just to maintain the illusion of a perfect family? I wish I could say I was surprised. But honestly, I wasn't. The cheating apple doesn't fall far from the cheating tree. My father had no problem looking the other way when it suited him, so of course he wanted me to do the same. To stay silent. To let Jerry off the hook. To let the whole thing disappear like it never even happened. They wanted me to pretend. To play along. To smile through the betrayal, just to keep up the family's pristine image. And then, to forgive Carla, take her back, and act like we were still some happy, loving couple. The sheer nerve of it all was beyond comprehension. I snapped. In a fit of anger, I texted Tina. Every detail. Every sickening truth. I laid it all out for her: the affair, the burner phone, and most importantly, the fact that Jerry had begged my father to keep me quiet. And just to make sure there was no way for Jerry to twist the story, I attached the screenshots I had taken. Then I turned my phone off. I didn't want to deal with the aftermath. Not yet. I knew the second I powered it back on, the storm would hit. And I wasn't ready to face it. Hours passed. When I finally switched my phone back on, it was exactly what I expected: missed calls. Dozens of them. Messages flooded my screen, all from my family. Angry, frantic, desperate. But I ignored them all. I only cared about one person's reaction: Tina's. Her message was simple. Short. But it carried the weight of 1,000 emotions. Thank you for telling me. I know what to do now. Ominous. And yet, strangely reassuring. I didn't have to wonder for long. The rest of the messages filled in the blanks. My mom. My dad. A few other family members. All of them in a full-blown panic. Tina and Jerry had gotten into a massive fight after my text. And then, she left. She took their son and moved back in with her parents. Divorce was now more than just a possibility, it was practically inevitable. And the worst part for Jerry? Tina was gunning for full custody. She would fight tooth and nail to keep their son away from him. Even if he managed to secure joint custody, she would make sure his time with the boy was as limited as possible. And somehow, in all of this, my family decided to blame me. As if I was the one who cheated. As if I was the one who destroyed a marriage. If they were so desperate to keep Jerry's happy family intact, maybe, just maybe, they should have taught him not to cheat. But they didn't. So this mess? It was entirely his own doing. For days, I received nothing but anger. Accusations. Guilt trips. Every message, every call, hammering in the same sentiment. I had ruined everything. I had torn the family apart. But I knew the truth. If Jerry had been happy, he wouldn't have cheated. If Carla had loved me, she wouldn't have betrayed me. And if my parents had any real integrity, they wouldn't have tried to silence me. Whatever guilt they tried to force onto me, I rejected it. Still, there was a weird, unsettled feeling lingering in my chest. I knew Jerry was miserable now. And the thought of him losing full custody of his son? It didn't sit well with me. For me and Carla, it was different. We had no kids. But for Jerry, this would change everything. And yet, it wasn't my problem. It had been a week since I sent that text. The chaos had died down, at least, in a way. No more daily bombardments of guilt-tripping messages. Mostly because I had blocked nearly everyone. I didn't need their toxicity. I didn't need their misplaced anger. The only person I hadn't blocked? Carla. But only because of the impending divorce proceedings. That tiny window of communication was strictly for legal matters, and yet she was using it for something else, pleading. Apologizing. Trying to justify her actions. She claimed she wasn't thinking straight. That she was sorry. That she regretted everything. I didn't care. I felt nothing for her anymore. No pity. No sorrow. If anything, I was grateful for her betrayal. It had saved me. Spared me from wasting years of my life on someone who never truly loved me. I shuddered at the thought, what if I had never found out? What if we had spent 5 years together, or more, and then I learned the truth? I refused to dwell on it. Instead, I focused on the one undeniable fact: Carla was never the one for me. No one who truly loved me would have done what she did. And I was grateful to be rid of her. For now, I was living in a hotel. No one had found me yet, and that was a relief. But I knew it wouldn't last. Sooner or later, they would track me down. The area didn't have that many hotels, and once they exhausted their search in the city, they would realize I had gone outside of town. I had been working from here, trying to adjust. It was lonely. Strange. But it was better than being surrounded by people who only cared about saving face. The divorce papers had already been served. Carla hadn't responded yet, probably clinging to the hope that I might change my mind. She was delusional. And soon enough, she'd realized that no amount of begging would ever make me take her back. 3 days later, my worst fear came true. My father and Jerry had found me. They had gone through every hotel in the city, and when they realized I wasn't there, they expanded their search. It didn't take them long to spot my car in the parking lot of my current hotel. And just like that, the storm was about to start all over again. The moment my father and Jerry stormed into the hotel, I knew things were about to explode. They weren't supposed to know where I was, and the staff had strict instructions not to tell them. But somehow, they found out. When my dad and Jerry demanded my whereabouts, the receptionist stuck to their story, claiming no one by my name was staying there. That might have worked if my father and Jerry hadn't already spotted my car in the parking lot. Realizing they'd been lied to, they lost it. Right there in the lobby, they started shouting, hurling insults at the terrified receptionists, creating a scene so disruptive that security had no choice but to calm me down to deal with the chaos. As I stepped out of the elevator, the tension in the air was suffocating. Security had already forced them outside, but I knew I couldn't just ignore them. Whatever they wanted, it wouldn't change what had already happened. Tina knew the truth. That damage was irreversible. Still, I went out to face them, dreading whatever absurd demand they were about to make. My father's voice was calm, too calm, as he said they had a solution, a way for me to make up for what I had done. I braced myself. Then came the punchline. I was to testify against Tina in court, paint her as unstable, as an unfit mother. That way, Jerry would get full custody, and everything would work out in their favor. It was laughable. Jerry's reputation was already in tatters. Tina had more than enough proof of his failures as a husband and father. Not only had he cheated, but he was barely present in his own home. He claimed to love his son, yet he left every responsibility to Tina: diaper changes, feedings, late-night cries. If she ever asked him to help, his excuse was always the same: he was too tired. Too tired to be a father, too tired to contribute to the household, too tired to be anything but a burden. And now, they expected me to lie on his behalf? To betray Tina even further? The sheer entitlement of it made my blood boil. They had ruined my life, and now they wanted me to help them ruin hers. I told them, without hesitation, that I wouldn't do it. That they meant nothing to me. I owed them nothing. Then, without another word, I turned my back on them and walked away, ignoring whatever desperate arguments they tried to hurl at me. Before heading back inside, I gave the security guard strict orders to remove them from the premises permanently. I even mentioned how dangerous they were, which was enough to get them banned from the property entirely. They were lucky the hotel didn't call the police, because if they had, both of them would have ended up in handcuffs. It's been 2 days since that incident, and neither my father nor Jerry has tried to reach me again. But Carla? That's a different story. She's been texting me constantly, far more than usual. We've already set a date for our first meeting with the court-appointed mediator, and it's only a week away. She's not contesting the divorce, so I have no idea why she keeps messaging me. I haven't opened a single one of her texts because I know exactly what they'll say. Apologies. Excuses. Empty words. The same repetitive nonsense. If she was really sorry, she would have done more. She would have called me. She knows I hate texting. Or better yet, she never would have betrayed me in the first place. Up until a few days ago, she was keeping it to 2 texts per day. Now, it's almost every hour. I don't have the mental energy to read whatever sob story she's spinning, but I suppose I'll have to check eventually. If only to see if it's something important. Well, that didn't take long. Just 2 hours after my last update, I finally caved and read Carla's messages. Turns out, she's finally woken up to reality. She and Jerry are over. She confronted him, and he admitted the truth: there was never any real future for them. For him, it was just physical. All those promises? Lies. He never intended to leave Tina for her. Never meant a single word he said. She, on the other hand, had actually fallen for him. And now, she's crushed. She told me she regrets everything. That she's ashamed of what she put me through. And, as some sort of twisted attempt at redemption, she's refusing to fight for anything in the divorce. No settlement, no alimony. She knows she doesn't deserve it. I didn't reply. What was there to say? It's tragic, sure, but she brought this on herself. What did she think would happen, getting involved with a married man who had a child? Did she really believe she'd be the exception? It was foolish. But, in the end, it works in my favor. Less paperwork. Less stress. I forwarded the messages to my lawyer and saved screenshots for good measure. Just in case. A couple of months have passed since all this chaos began. The divorce was finalized much faster than I anticipated. Our state requires a 90-day waiting period, and once that was over, everything else fell into place. Carla only kept what she had personally bought, while I got everything else, including the house. So, I moved back in. Financially, things were simple. Since we hadn't been married long, we had always kept our finances separate. No joint accounts. No entanglements. She walked away with her car, and that was that. As for Jerry and Tina, their divorce is still ongoing, and it's getting ugly. The custody battle is particularly brutal. I feel bad for my nephew. He's the one suffering the most in all of this. But there's a silver lining. Tina told me I could still be a part of his life, and that's a victory I won't take for granted. I love that kid. One day, I hope to have children of my own. Just not with Carla. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding. Reclaiming my life. And for the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm on the right path. Here's hoping it stays that way.